Lenny Vangilder, Ken Trahan at SportsNoah.com's preview of the Louisiana High School Prep Football Playoffs. It gets underway this week with 160 teams. By the time we get to 4 weeks from now, 10 teams will be in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Nobody knows more about prep football in Louisiana than my sidekick, Ken Trahan. Ken, let's start at the top, Class 5A. Who are your favorites to get to the Superdome?
I think there are 7 teams that have a legitimate chance to win the state championship. The top seed, St. Paul's, they're legitimate. They can win the state championship, I do believe. West Monroe, they're the 5th seed. They're West Monroe, and they're still gifted physically. They can win the state championship. Dutchtown is the best player in the state, if not the country, and you can't discount them, and they're an undefeated team. On the bottom half of the bracket, I think it's a little bit tougher overall. Acadiana and Karen Crow, both from the Lafayette area, legitimate chances to win, and Acadiana's an 11th seed, so that's going to upset some people along the way because of their lower seed. Remember, last year they were 27th. And then all the way at the bottom, I certainly think Jesuit has a real chance to get to the Dome if they can be healthy enough to get there. And then last but not least, Byrd is a terrific football team out of Shreveport, and they have a real chance to get there.
Let's take it back to this week. Best game on the board in 5A.
You know, I think as you look at this card, there are 1 or 2 games that stand out to me. I certainly think Brother Martin East St. John is an even game. It's being played locally, and I think that game is a flip-a-coin game. Darian Monroe is a tremendous player for East St. John. Jabbar Singleton, same way for Brother Martin, but hurt his knee last week. He's going to play, but we'll see how effective he is. Also in 5A, I think Higgins and Rummel is a good spot for an upset. Rummel's beat up tremendously. They got guys that are going to try to play, but they have as many as 5 starters that are hurt pretty badly. And Higgins is a big physical team, so I think that's one of those where the 27 seed could pull an upset, but that's another game to watch.
Well, you took my next question. The best chance for an upset, anything besides Higgins and Rummel?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, East St. John's an 18 seed. I think that certainly is a good shot for an upset. I think those 2 in particular stand out. But the other one I think is a real chance for an upset in 5A. 24th seeded Westgate at 9th seeded Mandeville. Mandeville's good. They throw the ball, but Westgate's been there, done that. Semifinals 4 times. They know how to do this. And they played a tough schedule. And they understand how to play in the postseason.
No question about it. Let's jump ahead to Class 4A. Start again. Best chances to make the Dome.
Well, I think Neville is the favorite. I mean, they're the number 1 seed, and they deserve to be in there. Brobridge has the 3 LSU commitments, and they're a very good team. St. Thomas More, very well-coached, solid football team. Turlings Catholic is good. But I really think the dark horse to get there is Edna Carr. They were there last year. They started this year having to play at St. Paul's and at Bowie in Arlington and went 0-2 and ended up 1-3 after losing to Salmon. Changed quarterbacks, ripped off 6 in a row. Defense is really good. Big, talented, good football team. I think they're a legitimate threat to get there, so I put them right there.
Best game on the first round card?
Well, I think if you look at the 4A card, I mean, it certainly Bellchase has speed. They're playing St. Augustine, who has speed and size. It's a local matchup that certainly comes to mind. I think East Jefferson and Alexandria, that could be East Jefferson's first playoff win since 1994, which would be a tremendous accomplishment for Nick Saltafamaggio. But maybe the best game is Franklinton at South Terrebonne. How good is South Terrebonne? Assumption, the best team in that part of the woods, and South Terrebonne the second best. Meanwhile, Franklinton not what they were last year, but they're battle-tested, and they were in the Dome and won a championship last year. They understand the postseason as well.
Best chance for an upset?
Well, I think you have to look at the one I just mentioned. I think Franklinton has a shot at South Terrebonne. I think they certainly have a chance to win that game. Franklin Parish, an 18 seed at 15 seed at St. Michael, I think they're a live underdog as well.
Jumping ahead to Class 3A, and we've seen a lot of the same teams over the years in this classification, but there's a new shooter in there with St. Charles moving up, and they've got to be one of the favorites.
Well, it's an asterisk with St. Charles. What a terrible turn of events for them. They lose not one but both of their star players. Lizedrick Thompson, torn ACL, he's out. And he's a Tulane commitment and a tremendous player. And then, of course, Marcus Hall, broken wrist prior to that back in week 6 or 7. And they're hoping he comes back at some point, but it's not this week. I think they win this week, but to lose both of those guys is catastrophic. I don't think they win the state championship without both. If they can get Hall back, they still have a chance to win it in my mind.
Who else do you see as favorites?
Well, I mean, certainly Farmerville. The Farmers are the top seed, and they've played St. Charles close the last couple of years in 2A, and they're in 3A now, and they're certainly a very good team, and I have to put them there. I think A-Meat is a really good football team in 3A, and I give them a real chance to play in the Dome.
Best first-round game in 3A?
You know, I think that as you look at this card, it's a little bit harder, but I'm looking at a couple of games that come to mind. Independence at Port Allen. It's a 19 seed against a 14 seed. Independence has been there, done that. Port Allen, a good record, but hasn't had that tradition of sorts, and maybe the schedule a little bit tougher for Independence where that's concerned. So I see that as a pretty good matchup overall.
Any other upset possibilities other than Independence?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that there's a couple that come to mind here when you look at this. I think Independence certainly is an upset special, but I also like McMain. I think McMain can win at Avoyles. Avoyles a very high-scoring team, and George Peppis, who does their play-by-play, won't like it, but I certainly think McMain has the team to go there and win. They possess the ball, run it, shorten the game. Josh Rounds is a terrific running back, and they're physical, and I don't know if Avoyles handles that.
We go to 2A, where any conversation with who's getting to the Dome has to start with John Curtis.
Well, it does, and yet again, here they are without their quarterback who's out for the year, Patrick Morton, so they have to go with a freshman in Abby Duzette. And Dozat has really done a good job overall. It limits their ability to go with outside veer, and it limits their passing game to a degree, but they're so good up front, and they're so good on defense that they certainly are still the favorite. Evangel, I don't care what their record is. They get the quarterback back. They're really good. Calvary Baptist can score with anybody. Bottom of the bracket, Winfield has great speed. They're the number 2 seed, and I think you have to look at them. University Lab is another team. I saw them. They have really good speed. They got all the coaches' sons from LSU on that team, and this is a good football team.
Best matchup this week?
Well, I think if you look at this thing, I think Oakdale at Pope John Paul, 19-14 is a good matchup, an even type of game. And this will be Coach John Marr's opportunity to advance. And I think he's done a very good job there. They're going to have to play well, and Noonan's going to have a big game for them, as he's done many times this year at quarterback. So I think that's probably the one that sticks out in my mind more than any other. But there are 2 or 3 others that are good matchups. I think Newman is a live underdog at Holy Savior Menard. Newman's played a very tough schedule. A disappointing loss to Cohen set them back, but they're good enough to go up there and play with Holy Savior Menard.
Well, I guess you told me what the upset is going to be there. So we'll jump ahead to Class 1A, and Ouachita Christian won this a year ago, and they're the 1 seed again this year. Who else is a candidate?
Well, they were second last year. They lost to White Castle in the Dome, but they're really good, and they're certainly the prohibitive favorite this year. I think you have to look at Central Catholic as a live team in the same half of the bracket. They're good. Vermilion Catholic is a really good football team in 1A. And Cedar Creek, who played Ouachita Christian very tough, is a team you have to look at. And as for dark horses, I like the West St. John Rams. They're a really good football team. They've made the transition clearly to their new coach, who's done an excellent job over the last couple of years. And they have an LSU commitment, and they're a good football team.
What games will you be watching on Friday?
Well, I think certainly you have to take a look at one game in particular that got my attention that I think is going to be an interesting football game. Is Country Day good enough? You know, even though they're at home, to beat Oak Grove, a traditional power. Oak Grove doesn't have the kind of team they've had in years past, but they've played a tough schedule, and they are Oak Grove. And Country Day, St. Martin's, and the like, they're going to have to prove themselves to be able to win in the playoffs. That's a 17-16 matchup. They bring in the temporary lights in Old Metairie at 6 o'clock, and that should be fun to watch.
Upset specials other than that possibility?
Yeah, I think that one certainly is a real possibility. And beyond that one, it's not as clear in 1A that there's a real opportunity for somebody to break through. If I had to look at anybody as a possible upset special, I certainly would give a chance to a team like, Hanson Memorial at St. John Plaquemine, although St. John runs the ball very well, and I'd still pick them. I think Arcadia has a chance at St. Edmund, but 1A is more the chalk in my mind.
Right, 1A, 2A, the lower classifications traditionally over the years. The seeds have a tendency to hold. Your upsets maybe have a chance to happen in a higher classifications with more players.
Well, I think there's a gap between the big and the small in 1A. I think the high and the low, there's a bigger gap than there is, say, in 4 or 5A, and I think you've hit it.
There's your preview for the Louisiana High School football playoffs. No other place to be than right here at sportsnola.com. And, of course, Ken's original Prep Football Report Friday nights. You can hear it right on the site here and, of course, at WGSO 990 AM and across the original network. Stay tuned to sportsnola.com for more high school sports coverage.